All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the third day of 5G Into the Abyss. Today, I start on a reading journey that will take a few episodes because I'm going to read the entire essay of Friedrich Nietzsche's Schopenhauer as Educator. This piece of literature, I have to give credit to the editor of the website Brain Pickings, which I love. Her name is Maria Popova, and she is the best at suggesting different pieces of literature that inspire her. Her library is incredible. And I got a section of this book from her website, and I immediately got the book and read it, and it's fantastic. So this is the entirety of Schopenhauer as Educator, written by Friedrich Nietzsche, and it's the third untimely meditation in a series of four what he called untimely meditations, translated and with some notes by Daniel Pellerin. And I will read some of Daniel Pellerin's notes to start so we understand the context of what we're hearing. So, Friedrich Nietzsche's Third Untimely Meditation, Schopenhauer as Educator. Translated with notes by Daniel Pellerin. The foreword. In his later years, Nietzsche grew so fond of posing as a latter-day Thor, instructing the modern world on how to philosophize with a sledgehammer, that one might be surprised at how gently he once used a chisel and a brush to sculpt a portrait of his idol from ancient marble. Elsewhere, we might hear Nietzsche thundering about the need to sacrifice meaningless millions to the worthy few. But in his homage to Schopenhauer, made to personify Nietzsche's own ideas about education in the most comprehensive sense, we see him starting from a different premise altogether, namely the singular marvel that is every human being, everyone entirely unique, everyone thrown together from such curiously multifarious ingredients into the single thing that he is, once and once only. The strict logic of his uniqueness, Nietzsche writes, makes man beautiful and remarkable, novel and incredible like all works of nature, and certainly not boring. If men so often look contemptible, it is because they allow themselves out of laziness and fear to degenerate into mere factory products. Yet any human being who wishes to be more than a herd animal need only stop making things easy for himself. Let him follow the call to be himself, to shed what is false about him, to become a little mischievous and rid himself of the shackles of opinion and fear, to consider what his soul has truly loved instead of merely killing time, and everything changes. It is by helping us make such a turn that true educators do us such an invaluable service, but they can only point the way. No one can build you the bridge on which you and only you must cross the river of life. There may be countless trails and bridges and demigods who would gladly carry you across, but only at the price of pawning and foregoing yourself. There is one path in the world that none can walk but you. Where does it lead? Don't ask. Walk. Quote from Nietzsche. A note on the text. Between 1873 and 1876, Nietzsche published four rather disparate essays, of which this one was the third, under the common heading of, pardon my German, Unzeitgemäße Betrachtungen. The term meditations, for Betrachtungen, suggests itself in English not only because of its fitting dictionary meaning, quote, serious and sustained reflection or mental contemplation, but also because another set of famous musings, those of Marcus Aurelius, would have been known to Nietzsche under the German title Selbstverstärkenden Meditations. This is what my 5G into the abyss is. Nietzsche repeatedly stresses how unzeitgemäße, literally not in accordance with time, he considered himself to be. Thus, in the preface to the second of his meditations, quote, "Only insofar as I am a sapling or pupil of more ancient times, especially the Greek, have I arrived at such untimely experiences of myself in these times." Beyond insisting that his thought is, quote, "out of season," as some translations would have it, Nietzsche challenges the limitations of a time-bound perspective in general, most clearly in paragraphs 22 and 31 below, as he writes in his unfinished manuscript on philosophy in the tragic age of the Greeks. Quote, "It lies in the nature of great philosophical men that they must disregard all that is merely current and momentary." End quote. I repeat that. Quote, "It lies in the nature of great philosophical men that they must disregard all that is merely current and momentary." End quote. Although Nietzsche dedicated his essay to the memory of Schopenhauer, the title is rather misleading. In Ecce Homo, at the end of his productive life, when he is, quote, "looking back from a distance," quote, "upon his writings," Nietzsche concedes, quote, "I do not wish to deny that at bottom they speak only of me. In Schopenhauer as educator, it is my innermost history, my own becoming, that is inscribed." Really, it is not Schopenhauer as educator who speaks here, but his opposite, Nietzsche as educator, end quote. The idea that even the greatest educator could relieve one of the burdens of self-education is revealed as youthful folly in paragraph 6. No one can build that bridge for you, quote. That said, Schopenhauer did see himself along the very lines imagined by Nietzsche as one of the great spirits who are the real educators of the human species, born into the world so that they may steer men towards the truth on the ocean of their errors and to raise them up towards the light, towards culture, towards refinement, out of the dark abyss of their crudity and vulgarity. And we begin. Friedrich Nietzsche's Third Untimely Meditation, 1874. Schopenhauer as educator. Section 1. That traveler who, having seen many lands and peoples and continents, was asked what human trait he had kept finding everywhere, replied, "They tend to be lazy." One might object that it would have been more accurate and valid for him to say, "They are all timid. They hide behind customs and opinions." At bottom, every human being understands very well that he is entirely unique on this earth, and that not even the strangest coincidence will ever again throw together such curiously multifarious ingredients into the single thing that he is. He knows that he hides it like a guilty conscience. But why? Because he fears his neighbor, who demands conventional behavior and disguises himself with it? But what forces an individual to fear his neighbor, to think with the herd, and to take no joy in himself? Modesty, perhaps, in a couple of rare cases. But in most cases, by far, it is a matter of comfort, inertia, in short, the very tendency towards laziness mentioned by the traveler. He is right. Human beings are even more lazy than they are timid, and what they fear most of all are the troubles with which an unconditional honesty and bareness would burden them. Only the artists despise this casual compliance with borrowed manners and cloak-like opinions, and reveal the secret cause of everyone's guilty conscience, namely, that every human being is a singular marvel. They dare to show us man being himself down to the subtlest twitch of his muscles, himself alone. And what is more, they show that the strict logic of his uniqueness makes him beautiful and remarkable, novel and incredible like all works of nature, and certainly not boring. If great thinkers despise mankind, it is on account of man's laziness. For thus do human beings look mass-produced, irrelevant, unworthy of being engaged or improved. Anyone who does not wish to be part of the masses need only stop making things easy for himself. Let him follow his conscience, which calls out to him, be yourself. All that you are now doing, thinking, desiring, all that is not you. Every young soul hears this call by day and by night and shudders with excitement at the premonition of that degree of happiness which eternities have prepared for those who will give thought to their true liberation. There is no way to help any soul attain this happiness, however, so long as it remains shackled with the chains of opinion and fear. And how hopeless and meaningless life can become without such liberation. There is no drearier, sorrier creature in nature than the man who has evaded his own genius, and who squints now towards the right, now towards the left, now backwards, now in any direction whatever. Such a man becomes, in the end, unfit for any kind of handling, for he is no more than a hull without a core, a tattered, gaudy, pompous scarecrow, a specious specter that cannot arouse even fear, let alone commiseration. And it is fair to say of the lazy man that he is killing time. Then one must also be seriously worried that a period relaying One must also be seriously worried that a period relying for its well-being on public opinion, that is, on private laziness, will one day really be killed. I mean that it will be erased from the recorded history of life's true liberation. How very distasteful it must be for later generations to concern themselves with the legacy of such a period in which it was not living men who did the ruling, but publicly opinionating pretenders. Hence, our age may well turn out, in the estimation of some remote posterity, to be the darkest and most obscure part of history, because it is the least human. When I walk along the new streets of our cities, I think to myself that of all these horrid houses raised by the tribe of public opinionators, nothing will remain in 100 years, and that by then, the opinions of these builders will likewise have fallen to pieces. What hopes, by contrast, may be cherished by all who do not feel themselves citizens of this age? For if they were its citizens, they too would be contributing to the killing of their age and would perish with it, whereas they are striving instead to revive these times and keep on living themselves. But even if the future left us nothing to hope for, our peculiar existence in this very now should be the greatest encouragement to us for living by our own measure and law. That is, we should take heart from the inexplicable fact that we happen to live precisely today, even if it took all of eternity to arise, that we possess nothing more than an arm's length of today, in which we should demonstrate why and for what end we happened to arise just now. We must give a responsible account of our existence before our own selves. It follows that we must wish to be real helmsmen of this life rather than allowing it to become thoughtless and arbitrary. One must take a somewhat mischievous and dangerous attitude towards existence, especially since one will always lose it in the end, however poorly or well things may turn out. Why cling to a miserable patch of land or a particular profession? Why listen to one's neighbor's chatter? How petty it is to bind oneself to views that lose their power to oblige a few hundred miles down the road. East and west are chalk marks drawn to mock our timidity. Let me try to find my way to freedom, the young soul says to itself. And it is to be deterred because two nations happen to hate and fight each other, or because there happens to be an ocean separating two continents, or because somewhere a religion happens to be in currency that did not exist even a few thousand years ago? None of that is really you, says the soul to itself. No one can build you the bridge on which you and only you must cross the river of life. There may be countless trails and bridges and demigods who would gladly carry you across, but only at the price of pawning and foregoing yourself. There is one path in the world that none can walk but you. Where does it lead? Don't ask, walk. Who was it that spoke these words? No one rises so high as he who knows not whither he is going. But how do we find ourselves again? How can man know himself? It is a dark, mysterious business. If a hare has 7 skins, a man may skin himself 70 times 7 times without being able to say, now that is truly you. That is no longer your outside. It is also an agonizing, hazardous undertaking thus to dig into oneself, to climb down roughly and directly into the tunnels of one's being. How easy it is thereby to give oneself such injuries as no doctor can heal. Moreover, why should it be even necessary? Why should it even be necessary given that everything bears witness to our being? Our friendships and animosities, our glances and handshakes, our memories and all that we forget, our books as well as our pens. For the most important inquiry, however, there is a method. Let the young soul survey its own life with a view to the following question. What have you truly loved thus far? What has ever uplifted your soul? What has dominated and delighted it at the same time? Assemble these revered objects in a row before you, and perhaps they will reveal a law by their nature and their order, the fundamental law of your very self. Compare these objects. See how they complement, enlarge, outdo, transfigure one another, how they form a ladder on whose steps you have been climbing up to yourself so far, for your true self does not lie buried deep within you, but rather rises immeasurably high above, or at least above what you commonly take to be your I. Your true educators and cultivators will reveal to you the original sense and basic stuff of your being, something that is not ultimately amenable to education or cultivation by anyone else. But that is always difficult to access, something bound and immobilized. Your educators cannot go beyond being your liberators. And that is the secret of all true culture. She does not present us with artificial limbs, waxed noses, bespectacled eyes, for such gifts leave us merely with a sham image of education. She is liberation instead, pulling weeds, removing rubble, chasing away the pests that would gnaw at the tender roots and shoots of the plant. She is an effusion of light and warmth, a tender trickle of nightly rain. Sometimes she is imitation and adoration of nature in her motherly and compassionate mood. At other times, completion of nature when her cruel and merciless attacks are preempted and turned to good, and when the expressions of her stepmotherly attitude and her doleful irrationality are discreetly veiled from view. There may be other methods for finding oneself, for waking up to oneself out of the anesthesia in which we are commonly enshrouded as if in a gloomy cloud, but I know of none better than that of reflecting upon one's educators and cultivators. And so today, I would like to recall the one teacher and master discipliner in whose memory I glory, Arthur Schopenhauer, in order that I might later recall others. That's the end of section 1. I'm going to leave this here for today. We're going to continue reading this until we finish. Consider it like a book on tape. You can tune in and tune out whenever you want, and know that roughly around 4 o'clock each day, I jump on Zoom, and you can use the ID below in the description to join me live, or you can tune into the YouTube channel as it gets populated with more and more Nietzsche. Thanks, everyone. Hope you're doing well.